16th at 6:30 p.m. We are in the Village Hall as well as on Zoom. The Zoom link is at the agenda, and we have a quorum. The agenda was properly posted, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next, then, we have public appearances. This is public's opportunity to speak on any subject. With that, we ask the public to share their name, their address, their municipality, and hold their comments to no more than 3 minutes in case we have a few folks who would like to speak. And with that, we do have a few wish to speak forms submitted up here, so I will call you up, and you can come to the mic and click it on and say what you want to say. With that, Stephen Way, and he wants to speak about the library consideration and purchase of the library space. So, Stephen? Good.
Let's see. Yep, I'm on.
Yes, you are.
Good evening. First, I want to thank you all for investing the time in our community. The time I spent, a short period of time I spent on the library board, which is a lot more narrowly focused in learning more about what it takes to be a board member. I really appreciate what you all have to do as board members, and probably what seems like a thankless job at times. So thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you to the staff for what they do for our village and the services they offer. I am here to speak on the support of the consideration to purchase space to establish a Cottage Grove library space. I appreciate the previous efforts that considered construction and building out a large library facility. However, those plans would have financially burdened the village. The effort to purchase existing space will greatly reduce the burden, and deliver a service that many in our community have been seeking out. I also understand that library board will have 4 to 5 years to build out the facility. So that time frame will allow funds to be hopefully allocated over time and not one large chunk of money in one setting. We also have the ability, as I remember from my time on the board, to do fundraising between $1 and $2 million. I believe that the study that we conducted identified. So in addition to other monies, that will help reduce the burden to our community members. One more thing here I thought I had. The timing of the decision, I think, is also important, because if we move forward with this, I believe we'd have to put this on a referendum, and the earliest referendum we could put this on is April. So I think making a clear and concise decision of getting it on there to allow the public to weigh in light of what we've seen with the Monroe Grove School Board, I think it's really important to be transparent in our decision-making process around this, as well as the other projects we have going on in the village. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. All right. Next, wish to speak, David Peterson, village residents, would like to speak on the library as well, 7B. David.
Hey everybody, thank you. David Peterson, 1012 Damascus Trail in Cottage Grove. As the Dane County Supervisor representing Cottage Grove, I spent a lot of time listening to the concerns of our community since taking office in May. One thing is clear is people are hurting, and they need more support than ever. While the idea of taking on the financial responsibility of a library may seem daunting at first, the benefits it would bring to our village are invaluable. Libraries provide much more than just books. They offer free access to essential services like job training, resume writing workshops, internet access, and safe spaces for children and adults to gather and learn. In a time when economic uncertainty is high, the role of a public library in providing these services cannot be overstated. On the agenda tonight is the prospect of hiring a consulting firm to assess the viability of purchasing the recently closed Learning Ladder daycare. This option presents a financially responsible solution. While a new building would cost somewhere between 20 and 30 million, securing the Learning Ladder facility would cost between 1 to 2 million, just a fraction of that. Not only does this make financial sense, but it also drastically increases the likelihood of a library becoming a reality in our village sooner rather than later. By choosing a more affordable path, we can meet this critical need without overburdening taxpayers. I've been involved in the library project since 2019, and I understand that there are many competing priorities for our community. However, a library can address multiple needs in one fell swoop. Whether it's access to education, technology, or community building opportunities, it lifts all members of our village. As they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. Further, as a member of both the Dane County Board and the South Central Library System Board of Directors, I'm deeply committed to working collaboratively to bring this project to fruition. I'm ready to advocate for compromise where needed, especially when it comes to the stringent Dane County standards and levy limit realities we're facing today. It's my firm belief that we can balance these constraints with the greater good of bringing a library to Cottage Grove, a resource that will benefit our residents for generations to come. In closing, the decision to move forward with the Learning Ladder acquisition is a smart financial and community building move. I encourage the village board to support this step forward so we can give our community the resources and support it deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next then, wish to speak, Aaron Huft, village resident, and again, wishes like to speak again on the village library. Aaron? There you go.
Am I on now? Okay,
Yes, you
thank you. Erin Haft, 220 Dentaria Drive. Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to address the Village Board of Trustees regarding the addition of a library in Cottage Grove. And I'd like to encourage you as well to take the next step to see if the previous Learning Ladder building could be transformed into a library. I grew up just down the road in Stoughton. And growing up, my brother and I took advantage of library resources and actively participated in library events and the annual summer reading program. Our mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she utilized library programming to enrich our childhood, build community, and provide learning opportunities outside of our home. Fast forward 25 years, and I now have 2 young children of my own. I have been a full or part-time stay-at-home mom since our first child was born, and I have turned to library programming to enrich their childhood, build community, and provide learning opportunities outside of our home. My children absolutely love Friday story times with Miss Heather, where books come to life using music and dancing, sign language is taught, and teamwork and kindness are all modeled and encouraged. My children have been able to participate in book swaps and visit the Big Red Reading Bus to choose texts to bring home that interest them. My son currently participates in movement story time at Dolphin Swim Academy, where he gets to swim after an engaging story time. These opportunities are all possible thanks to the Village of Cottage Grove library programming. And though these programs are wonderful, a physical library space would amplify these opportunities so much more and ensure consistent and appropriate space for these programs to take place. I hold my master's degree in education, along with reading teacher and reading specialist licenses. I have worked as an elementary classroom teacher for 8 years, and I currently work as a part-time elementary reading specialist. Throughout my teaching experiences and coursework in my master's program, I have seen firsthand the importance that books play in the life of a child. Having engaging materials in the hands of children and children finding success in reading is one of the largest indicators of their success in school overall. Libraries serve as an incredible resource for educators to turn to help support all learners in their classrooms. A library in Cottage Grove would benefit hundreds of students in our community each year and would supplement and enrich coursework happening in the Monona Grove School District. Finally, I would love to express my support in looking into Learning Ladder as a future library site. To build a brand new library could cost the village up to $30 million, but purchasing Learning Ladder could be between $1 and $2 million. Not only is purchasing Learning Ladder the logical option, but it is the fiscally responsible path for the village board to take as well. Village trustees, you have an exciting and important opportunity in front of you. It is an opportunity for this community to become a more literate and rich place to live. As an educator, community member, and mom, I greatly look forward to the day where I can bring my children to the Cottage Grove Library for the first time. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Also wish to speak then, John Scheffler, again, village resident, and wishes to speak on the library. John? No, it's got to have the little red circle around it. It's the person, yeah, person that looks like he's talking.
There we go.
Yeah,
Thank you. John Scheffler, 207 Donkel Court. I wish to publicly register my household's support for the village to pursue any and all reasonable opportunities to procure the needed resources to take advantage of the unique opportunity we have to transform Learning Ladder, a landmark property rooted in our community's history and growth, as in our family's case, was a deciding factor in choosing Cottage Grove to raise our family into the cornerstone of a revitalized city center that can serve as an anchor for continued public and private community growth and be yet again a deciding factor to encourage new residents to settle here over anywhere else. The opportunities should include consideration of public referendum, public and private grants, including creative or holistic applications, such as under Homeland Security funding, and including dedicated space for continuity of government planning, or perhaps an alternate village emergency operations center, or similar concepts. Or consider solicitation of public-private partnerships for funding, similar to how the City of Madison's K-9 and Horse police units are primarily privately funded. There are several studies that highlight the benefits of a community experiences after establishing a public library in the United States. One notable example is the study conducted by the Institute of Museum and Library Services titled Public Libraries, a Vital Community Resource. Key findings from the research showed libraries positively impact educational support. Libraries provide educational programs for children, teens, and adults, enhancing literacy and academic performance. This includes story time, tutoring, and access to research databases, which support students' academic achievements. With our recent budget crisis affecting the district, what better time do we have to get a library and support our children? Economic development. Libraries often offer job research assistant, resume building workshops, and access to job databases. These resources contribute to reducing unemployment and fostering local economic development. Studies from the American Library Association show that library job programs help people find employment, which in turn benefits the local economy. Social connectivity. Public libraries serve as hubs for community engagement where people from different backgrounds come together. This strengthens social cohesion and provides a space for civic participation and cultural exchange. Libraries also offer free access to the internet, which helps bridge the digital divide, especially in underserved communities such as the elderly. Health and wellness. Libraries provide access to health information and host wellness programs that can improve overall community health. Studies have shown that library health initiatives such as mental health awareness workshops and fitness classes contribute to better public health outcomes. Property value and local development. Research from Urban Libraries Council has shown that public libraries can increase nearby property values and contribute to neighborhood revitalization. Communities often see a rise in local business development and an increase in property tax revenue after establishing a library. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Anybody else in the Zoom or in the room? Okay. All right, then we'll move to discuss and consider our meeting minutes from our village board meeting held on September 3rd. Any questions, comments, or edits in regards to the meeting minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from September 3rd, 2024 meeting.
Is
I'll
there-
second.
We have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Then we'll move on to unfinished business. In this case, discuss and consider the contract with Associated Appraisals for the assessment services.
So the contract is as discussed in closed session. We can't make final decisions in closed session, so this is just approving the final contract. So I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Cameron?
I'll make the motion to approve the contract with Associated Appraisal for assessment services as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Moving on to new business. This is the annual review for village consultants, service providers. And we have Baker Tilly. Amanda. Feels like you're just here, doesn't it?
Yeah. We wouldn't want to go too long, right?
Cameron, I can just share then. Okay. All right. All right, thanks for having me tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about Baker Tilly and what we do for the village on an annual basis. We do provide the annual audit services. Just a little bit about Baker Tilly, if you're not familiar with us, we have a team dedicated to working for the public sector. So we have many clients nationwide. We have 360 plus employees working in the public sector nationwide as well. We've grown, but we also remain a huge presence right here in Wisconsin. We service the village out of our Madison office here in town. And have been for as long as I've worked there. So we have a local team, born and bred here. Audit and accounting work we do mostly out of the Madison office, and then we also have a few other services that we provide out of the Madison office as well, and including some economic development consulting, utility work, and risk and IT analysis. Different teams though. The services that we provide really relate to the audit of the financial statements at this time. That includes an audit of all of the funds of the village, which includes the general fund, debt service, capital projects, utilities, and so forth. The main point here is the issuance of an opinion, which basically means that the financial statements that get presented to you in the end, we believe to be materially correct, do not have major errors in them, should be representative of your financial condition at the end of the year. We also issue an ancillary document with some internal control information in it. So that's a good document to take a look at if you haven't seen it already, to kind of assess, how do our controls look at the village for the last year. And that kind of sometimes changes over the course of the years, and certainly has in the last few years as well. When we're done with the audit, during the audit, we come out on site, we get a lot of information from the finance team, pull together our audit file, and then when the financial statements, we've reviewed those and feel good about about the financial statements, we issue that opinion, and then we come and present some financial highlights to the village board. Some of the other services that we have provided in the past, such as TIF reports, state filings with the PSC or the Department of Revenue, and some accounting assistance that we'd provided in the past, is generally now completed by village staff or other contractors. So we're not quite as involved with those services anymore. Things that we still are involved with, though, that's good to know as a governing body, is that the financial software that the general ledger is in is a product of our civic systems division of Baker Tilly. That is the Cassell software. Basically, they help install or support issues with that system, but we don't really, they're not involved with the audit, and we're not involved with that. So we keep those responsibilities pretty separate. Some of the other things that we as the audit team are involved in, though, every so often, one of the TIF districts might need a statutory audit, so we do those audits. We also provide general advice and consulting as requested by the village staff. And then as new reporting standards come out, we do help provide guidance, tools, and templates so that those reporting standards can be implemented appropriately. Just to reiterate the objectives of the audit, is really to provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So we kind of mentioned that already. An unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance that is available in the world of opinions, and the village has always had an unmodified opinion, so that is good news. Internal controls, like I mentioned before, we do some identification and testing of those controls, mainly over the financial reporting process to make sure that what is going through that general ledger seems appropriate. Here's the approximate timeline. We don't spend a lot of time out here. You know, we're here in sometime during the months of November and December to do some preliminary year-end work. But then March is when we come out and do the bulk of the audit work. We spend April and into May doing the wrap-up piece, reviewing the financial statements, and issuance of those deliverables. And then typically towards either the end of May or into June, we come out and do our presentation of the financial highlights to you at that time. So pretty short time frame. We're really only involved about 6 months out of the year, but we do hear from Cameron regularly if he has questions or wants to run something by us. So we appreciate those touch points throughout the year. We do have a laundry list here of other services. Just wanted to share with you. We won't go over those in detail. And then here's our team. So Vicky's the principal in charge of the audit team, and then I'm the director, and then Ryan Shavlik is the senior who's been involved with the audit. That's all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions from the board for Amanda?
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, next then we have discuss and consider a contract for services of Edward Anderson Architects for the site feasibility and due diligence efforts of establishing a village library at the former Learning Ladder property. And we have Sean Kelly, I believe, on the Zoom. Sean, you might be on double mute.
I am here. Can you
There
hear
you
me?
go, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. I appreciate the opportunity to present to you today, and I can walk through the proposal if that's what you'd like. But I'm an architect at Edward Anderson. I've worked on libraries for over 20 years of my career, so hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have about what our current proposal is. Matt, would you want me to walk through some of the key points of it, or are we?
Yes, please go through a summary.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this is a pretty typical request. So a lot of libraries are reusing spaces within villages. That's a very responsible and a straightforward thing to do. Library buildings are a bit unique. They have unique structural requirements. And as technology grows, they have pretty unique electrical and as well as infrastructure requirements. So we've brought on mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, as well as a structural engineer. What we basically do is pre-evaluate. We get as many documents as we can before we go out to the site. Then we do as much as we can in a single day on the site, walking through everything, kind of confirming all the facilities, building systems, as well as the structural requirements. And then if we see anything that would be of concern, we would either propose additional testing, or we would come up with our recommendations on how to proceed, which would include any sort of updates that might need to be made to the facility, along with our opinion of costs that it would take. Most buildings that convert from a standard structure to a library do need structural upgrades. Books are pretty heavy, so that is a pretty standard one. Just making sure the building systems are in conformance, and then what would be the kind of the village's liability in terms of bringing the building up to the current library building code. So that would all be kind of included in the report. We'd also do some general evaluation of the spaces available as they relate to the building program that was provided to us. You had a building program from a previous project, so we would look through that. This building is about a third of the size of what your original goal was, so we would be kind of evaluating the space that is there versus the space's intent and making recommendations about that. All that goes into a draft report, which is presented to the village. We then would incorporate any questions or comments into a final report that would be submitted. So, any questions about that?
Yeah, I had a question. When I'm looking at the deliverables, so the deliverables is a summary report, so it's not the recommended next steps. So as you look at the recommended next steps, what does that look like in terms of cost to actually get to a project proposal that we would understand the total costs?
The summary report will include a level of costs that to bring major systems into conformance. We would also provide you with general renovation costs. These, our firm does a significant number of libraries every year, so we have access to cost estimating as well as opinions of costs that we would then put, into the report as to what not only it would take to bring systems up to code, but then to renovate the building. Libraries like meeting rooms, study rooms, things like that. It's probably not set up as a daycare to be a library. So there will be a opinion of cost recommendation in there. Until we sit down and actually walk through a building program, it would be difficult to be more of an itemized estimate, but it will be a general estimate.
So the deliverable that states a summary report, that will have an estimate. What level of estimate? Is that like a plus or minus 30%, or what level of scope would that have?
We usually give a high-low budget in there, and that's generally about 10% is the high-low at this point in the project. Again, until we get a little bit more concrete information. But we would have things like recommendations on what to do to the structure. I'm just letting you know that's probably one of the deficiencies in the building. I can't say for sure, but it most likely is. We would have a probability of what to do, and then we would have a general cost with that. So that would all be included. I'd say generally it's a high-low 10%.
Other questions for Sean? Cindy?
So yeah, this is a 3-month turnaround time. So we could expect something by the December meeting.
Yeah, our hope would be to go as fast as we possibly can, schedules pending. So typically a turnaround time for this is about 90 days. But our goal is always to deliver faster.
Sean, did you say how many libraries you guys worked on in the last couple of years?
Our firm generally averages between 5 and 8 library projects.
Okay.
We have 3 different locations. Madison is one of them. So that's about per year is about what we do.
Thank you.
Just to add on to John's question, have you worked on any libraries like kind of in a similar situation where you're kind of converting another property into a library?
Yeah, several of them. I am trying to think of ones that I've worked on in the Madison area that might be easy for you to go and see. And I'm having a little blank here on some of those. But we're currently working on a couple in Illinois, right on the north side of Chicago, that are doing this. Wilmette, Winnetka, Northfield. These are all libraries that are purchasing existing buildings in their communities. Their communities are very landlocked, so vacant property is not an option for them. So we're going through evaluating buildings. We've converted old shopping centers. We've converted kind of 2-story office buildings. In Rockford, Illinois, we converted an old juvenile detention center. So it just depends on the building and just understanding what's there. And all of those had a variety of different issues. The only issue in common was structural. So that's why I was kind of saying that is most likely going to be an issue with this building. But this is a pretty common common request in library land is to reuse existing infrastructure.
Thank you.
I guess my question's about the estimates for construction, and I believe in talking about our police department project, you use local contractors to understand the costs of construction. Would you be consulting your team on this to see kind of what the local market's like, and so we can have, you know, I know this is high level and not real in depth, but you know, a good ballpark figure on what some of these costs would be?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be working with Mike Zilke, who is your project manager on the police station. So he will be a critical piece of this. I've worked with Mike my entire career. So we've worked on some projects together, obviously some projects not together, but he'll be the main point of contact for this. He was unavailable tonight for the meeting. So I'm filling in for him. My main job is libraries. I do libraries every single day and kind of run a pretty big library team, which I then partner with Mike when it's appropriate. So yes, we will. Short answer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Sean? Rick?
Not a question for Sean, just a comment about this agenda item. I think it might make sense to not act on this one until after the closed session discussion. There are some things we'd like to discuss in closed session before we approve or deny this, I suppose.
Any board member have an issue? All right. So you just hold off on that until after closed session?
Yes, just because we want to have a discussion about the library property itself before, I guess, make a commitment one way or the other on the due diligence, so.
I have a question for Cameron, or is that time now, or do you want us focused?
I think it's appropriate if it's about how we're paying for it.
Yes, that is my question.
I was waiting for that question to come. 410, or our Legacy Capital Project Fund, we've historically kept around 450,000 of it to kind of have a buffer for, you know, projects like this that come up that require us to act quickly, project overages. It would ultimately be coming from 410 cash reserves. We do have a couple other kind of bigger projects that you'll see in the 2025 budget. We know that we are, I think, in year 3 of non-compliance for revaluation. So there will be a revaluation scheduled in 25 for 26. So that's a project that's going to have to come out of that bucket. As well as, you know, we continue to do that university project. So just kind of, that's not an unlimited bucket of money. So when we're talking about kind of dividing those resources, kind of strategically thinking what those funds are being used for. Again, the stormwater grant to, you know, while we're getting half of that back, that's still $82,500. That's going to come out of that bucket. It does get slightly replenished with interest income every year, a little bit of cable franchise fees, but it's not going to sustain a high level of spending year over year.
So Cameron, could we plan in a future budget to reimburse the fund for that expense so we have funds available for future unexpected projects? Or is that, I guess, it's not unlimited, but we'd want to replenish it? Or is it like?
Yeah, unlike the park development fund, there's not as much of an, I would say, quote unquote, legal incentive to reimburse. I think it's a strategic decision. And so as I might at a future board meeting, if I feel like the general fund is solid and have a recommendation to transfer funds into that, that's a way to strategically build up that fund. Again, our kind of target for that fund's been about 450,000. There's been no rhyme or reason for that. It's been a good amount to, you know, make sure if we're we're doing a road project, we don't have to borrow early just for a small project when we could really save 6 months of interest by having that little bit of a buffer. So we can maybe think about, is that dollar amount still what we want in there, or should there be a target for that fund? So long story short, no, it's not something I would ultimately recommend reimbursing.
Any other questions in regards to this topic at this point? All right. We'll revisit this after the closed session then. Anything else, Rick, I need to procedurally do?
I guess just want to make sure nobody objects to that.
I did ask that earlier, but
Yeah. All right.
I didn't get anybody saying hey. All right. With that, then, we'll move on to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees, starting off with Public Works. Chris?
We met on Tuesday, September 10th at 6 p.m. Passed the minutes. Talked about the 2025 department budget. It's looking like a 1.5% decrease from the previous year, and that's thanks to some leftover salt reserves and some savings from switching the recycling provider. We talked about pushing the Ollie Street project 1 year for the utility needs. And then ultimately, we voted in favor of passing the budget 6-0. We talked about buying a new plow truck, which there's a discuss and consider on the board agenda tonight. I can let Kyla take that in a minute, but there's an opportunity to get a plow truck early. And we approved that 6-0. Engineers report talked about Shady Grove, West Lawn, Quarry Ridge, and breaking ground on the Amazon project. Everything's moving along nicely. Directors report, they're finished with sidewalks, grinding to come, chip sealing is done, and they're working on streetlights on County N. And we set the date for the next meeting and adjourned.
So I'm actually gonna take the financial piece on the snow patrol trucks. Kind of internal joke there.
Yeah.
So we have a unique opportunity. So funny enough, the 2023 plow truck, or the tandem truck that was placed in 23 is scheduled to be delivered to Burke on October 30th, 2024. This opportunity came about, our street superintendent came to us about a single axle tandem snow patrol truck that's available currently. It's in the budget for 2025. So the way that this will work financially is we budgeted for both the truck as well as the upfitting. So this comes in two pieces. The first expense is buying the chassis, similar to an ambulance. The second piece is upfitting it for everything that it needs to do for plowing. So we have an opportunity to utilize our 2024 budget dollars to purchase both trucks, and then actually in our 2025 budget, have the plow truck upfitting for both trucks come less than what's in the financial management plan. So ultimately tonight, recommending that the board approves to let Kyla go and pick up the single axle truck and deliver it to Burke. Once both are delivered, it takes 6 to 9 months for us to receive it. So we actually won't get either one of these trucks until October next year I would say earliest. So this would, and when we get those two trucks, we're going to be offsetting some of the cost of the trucks, about $60,000 for sending the two trucks we have to Wisconsin surplus. So conservatively, we believe between the two trucks that are being sold, we'll be able to generate $60,000 of earnings, which again will offset the cost of some of the upfitting. So I can take any questions.
So then an impact on 24 is neutral because of the way you're, putting the outfitting into 2025?
So we did account for about $30,000 of selling a truck. We won't be able to do that. So we'll technically be $30,000 in the hole this year, but then $30,000 ahead next year when both trucks are sold. So yeah, that essentially neutral by the end of 25.
It's a timing thing more than anything. Okay.
Unfortunately. And the 2023 plow truck has been a ride. We didn't think we were going to even get it yet this year. So I'm glad that there's an opportunity to fit a significant need.
It should be noticed and noted in talking with all the vendors, snow patrol trucks are going to go up anywhere between $20,000 and $40,000 starting in 2025. And with transmissions, they're going to be out even longer for procurement. There were multiple municipalities that wanted this one truck, and so if we get the go-ahead, then it's ours.
Well, I'll make the motion that we approve the purchase of the 2025 plow truck in 2024 as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Any questions for Chris? Or Kyla? All right, thank you, Chris. Next then, we have the Ad Hoc Centennial Committee. Sydney.
The Party Planning Committee met on Wednesday, September 11th at 9 a.m. And we had Chief Gary join us and talk about how we're going to keep everyone safe at the event, which is Saturday, October 12th from 11 to 3 on both East Reynolds and West Reynolds. And people will be crossing N because N will be open to traffic. So we want to make sure that we have signage and police presence and volunteer presence there to make sure everyone is safe. 1855 management joined us. They're interested in hosting kind of a beer tent on the green space across on Reynolds Street there, where our food trucks will also be. And so we'll likely see that at the next village board meeting. We talked a lot about marketing and making sure that we're getting the information out. So we have an event page to the village that's also posting fun facts about the last 100 years in the village. We are going to send a postcard out to all the households in Cottage Grove. Our e-signs and information on the utility bill too. So please share and tell everyone to attend on October 12th. Flynn Hall was cleaned. All the glass cases were cleaned and ready to showcase all of the historical memorabilia. We have 12 to 15 antique pieces of farm equipment and a fun old-time photo booth that we also approved, along with 500 cupcakes. So our next meeting is a walkthrough on September 25th at 1:30 p.m., meeting at Flynn Hall. And we're meeting also October 9th, and then the big day. So you can take questions if you have it.
You said that was on October 12th?
It's October 12th from 11 to 3.
So kind of what Cindy was mentioning, just if everyone's kind of wondering, well, where on my utility bill? So we have a small space on the utility bill. It's kind of on the top right portion of the bill. We're looking on a monthly basis just to add general notes. We did a brush pickup note once. We did a my vote note another time. So looking to use this as an opportunity. We have to send the bills out anyways, so an opportunity to communicate. So if anybody has any ideas for after, so this next one will be centennial, but if anybody has ideas on something that they'd want communicated, reach out to me and we can have it. Very limited, probably a couple sentences max, so just efficient in our communication.
All right, thanks Cameron, thanks Cindy. Moving on then to Utility Commission. Chris.
We met on September 11th at 5 p.m. Past the minutes, we had a presentation to the board from Ellers about the sewer long-range cash analysis, talking about some potential future rate increases and the overall financial situation of the sewer utility. We got the CMAR annual report from the DNR, in which we scored very well. There was an update on the Ridge Lift Station. We talked about the water budget, which is looks like less than it was this year, and the sewer budget, which is a little more than this year. But we passed both of those, and we discussed and considered and passed the purchase of a new sewer vacuum truck. The current one we have is from 2005, and we need to get a new one. And engineers reports talked about Quarry Ridge is ready to go, anticipating starting in October of this year. Amazon had pre-construction meeting in August. Utilities will be installed in the spring of next year. SCADA project had pre-construction in June. Construction on and off starting next year. Director's reports. Well 3 engine was removed to prep for the SCADA. I can't read my writing, so I apologize for whatever that was. And we set date for next meeting, and we had a closed session that we talked about, and then we adjourned.
Chris, I'm just going to add a couple things. So for new board members, the water and sewer utility adopts the budget. That budget does not come ultimately to the village board. They have the same kind of decision-making power as this board does. So as Chris mentioned, water expenditures are actually $70. What was asked for 2025 was $70 more than this year. Again, trying to keep expenditures flat or decrease on both the water and sewer. Sewer, there were, unfortunately, with MMSD, we're going to be probably looking at something like an 18% increase this year for our fees. That being said, Kyla, JJ, and I worked together, reviewed the budget, and we actually cut almost $220,000 of expenditures that weren't MMSD in order to decrease the rate that's going to need to be effective to pay our MMSD bill. So that rate that was approved by the utility commission was a 10% increase as of January 1 for the sewer utility. Again, no increase in the water utility. And I was directed to send out communication to residents about, how to get involved with communication on MMSD, as well as kind of what we did internally to make sure that the budgetary impact on each household family, that we kind of did our part to make sure we cut as much as we could while also operating a safe system. So that communication will likely be timed probably a week or two after the centennial communication.
So Cameron, you said that the utility board operates a little bit independently. Where does the $485,000 for the sewer vac truck come from? And was that already pre-budgeted?
Yep, so that specific vehicle comes from an equipment replacement fund. So because they have a certain type of loan that's out there, they're required to have a schedule of assets on an equipment replacement schedule. So every year they're required to put a certain amount of money, it's actually $71,667 a year into this bucket. So that money was sitting aside to purchase that vehicle or piece of equipment. So then now what will happen is the new number will go on the schedule, and that's what the amount that's in that schedule is increased. So it might go from $70,000 to $80,000 a year that we have to put in that bucket.
Cameron, is that on the vouchers then, is that listed for Brown Equipment Company?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And so that is actually, and thanks for asking, that's a net expenditure. So there is a trade-in value there. So it's, what's on the voucher is likely the total amount.
Yeah, the total
Yep.
and
So-
the less.
So the net is the 485.
Yep.
So 60,000 is actually a really good price for the existing 20-year-old truck that we're getting. So very happy with that price.
And do we know when we're going to get this vac truck?
Kyla, do we know when we're going to get it?
Yes, we can get it as soon as possible. It was our guys, after it was approved at utility, they went down to coordinate with Brown in McHenry, Illinois to get the tubing and everything set up how they want it. And so there were also some dings on the truck that they were not very happy about that weren't promised to us. So they are getting that fixed, and then it will be brought up to us.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Well, Cameron, I wanted to say kudos to you for finding the $225,000 to kind of reduce some of that. What were some areas that you noted that you could reduce?
So there's some things that we could look forward to roll into like a capital project in the future. So mostly sewer lining. We had been pretty aggressively trying to address that without having to go the capital route. We now think we might find some benefit doing it as one kind of bigger project in the future. There's also just some efficiency with Dave Yaris and Jeremy. They just found some efficiency in our maintenance budget. So we're ultimately because of the staff we have, are just more efficient.
Cameron, just a note about our sewer rates, and a lot of it is dictated by MMSD, and they have a lot of compliance in order to get their permits approved by DNR and EPA, and so they're trying to balance out, our water has to go somewhere and treated, and so they set a lot of the rates. Do any of our communications talk about how MMSD treats our water, or can we, it's kind of like the impact. You send something down the drain, you don't really think about what happens to it and that it costs something to treat it, especially because it's not right here.
Yeah, so the communication that's going to go out to residents is not going to just be a one-pager. It's going to be a 2 or 3-pager. Basically, how did we get to the budget this year, as well as kind of some of the background information on MMSD. They have a lot of infrastructure that was put into the ground in 1960 and 1970. So unfortunately, this is not the end of the increases. And I think it's very important that residents understand that that's coming. And unfortunately, when we started the sewer study process, we were looking at potentially a 30% increase before we started making cuts. And again, a 30% increase is unacceptable. We would never recommend an increase like that. So it ended up being, I think, and I was just, going to look, I think it was about $4.50 on average, on the average monthly bill. So not a huge impact, but again, we know there's a lot of people out there that are living on fixed income, a lot of people out there that are struggling. So we really take that increase seriously, every penny of that.
And there's a commission made up of all the members of the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District, and so we do have a voice as a member of MMSD on what the capital improvements are and the goals they're trying to meet. So it's not, it is, some things are out of our control, but we do have a voice in what they're doing at MMSD also.
Yeah, and I actually do have a budget notice. So the proposed 2025 district budget and public hearing, they will be meeting on September 26th, 2024 at 8 a.m. To talk about their budget, located at 1610 Moreland Road, Madison, Wisconsin. So I guess I encourage anybody out there who's curious, attend virtually, go, make your voice heard.
Thanks, Cameron.
Anything else on utility? All right. Then we'll move to Plan Commission. There is a discuss and consider here on Plan Commission. I'll do a quick overview. And then Aaron, are you going to speak on the housing piece then, since county's not here? So we met on September 11th, had a presentation from Dane County in regards to the technical assistance program for a comprehensive plan for our housing chapter updates. The county's moving right around now to various municipalities who their housing chapters are a little more dated than ours is. It's soon to be out of date and has been on the radar to address. So Aaron will get more into that, but the Plan Commission did recommend to this board that we move ahead with looking for the county's assistance, at least for the housing chapter updates. And then we planned to have a public hearing on some ordinances related to tobacco and vape shops, alcohol sales, and fences, but and keeping chickens in the village, in particular, non-households. Those were all tabled because legal is still working on some specific language in that, so we'll bring that back at the next Plan Commission. And that was pretty much it. But Aaron, you want to talk about the housing chapter?
Yeah, thanks, John. So you remember a couple months ago, I did a presentation about the report that came out of the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy that had a lot of recommendations for different entities, including municipalities, a lot of which were, updating comprehensive plans, updating zoning ordinances, things like that. One of the needs that was recognized was that, those kinds of updates either take staff time and/or money to implement for each of the municipalities. So this program kind of comes out of the recognition of that, and Dane County added a planner to their staff that will work free of charge to help municipalities update the housing chapters of their comp plans. Somewhat separate but related, last year the state invested over $500 million into various housing programs that are administered through WIDA. One of the criteria for municipalities to be eligible for that is that your comp plan has been, or the housing chapter of the comp plan has been updated within the last 5 years. Ours was updated in 2020, so we're kind of getting to the edge of that. And since we're not looking at doing the whole update until 2026, we would have a period where we would fall out of eligibility for those programs. So this does come at a fortuitous time for us to kind of do this interim step of updating that one chapter. And I think updating housing and economic development chapters first kind of drive the transportation and land use anyway, so I think it makes sense in that regard. So as John said, the Plan Commission recommended we take part in this, and I would recommend we do so also.
I didn't get a chance to watch the presentation yet, but did I see one of the people voted against recommending it? Or was it unanimous?
Yes. No, it
Did
was
they
not.
give a reason why?
They don't have to give a reason
No,
why.
I was just curious if you
No,
gave
they
one.
did not.
Okay,
6.
okay.
Yeah.
So Aaron, I guess I got a question. So it was a little unclear. I read this a couple times. It's not super clear, but when we participate, they're going to help us and provide resources to update our plan. What is the commitment that we're making as a community moving forward after that's completed? Or does it just make us eligible?
So the housing chapter would have recommendations and goals and priorities for future implementation steps. Probably looking at things like potentially updating the zoning ordinance, looking at kind of feeding into the next update of the land use chapter, where we might want different types of housing. If we're going to diversify, the housing needs that we have, that kind of thing. So it doesn't obligate us necessarily to anything, but it kind of feeds into those future planning efforts.
The other thing it gives the option, if it's current, for those funds to also, for developers to go after those funds if we're in compliance. So this feeds from our ad hoc housing task force. There's a lot of recommendations in there that Plan Commission, we've seen, we're slowly kind of working through those. Aaron's certainly going to use those. Aaron was also on the overall task force for the county, lending a voice for the village as well. So it all kind of parses in very nicely for that. And we do need to get this done. So it's nice to get another pair of hands to help out.
Yeah, and I can just add just a little bit more context just on the comprehensive plan. So that itself isn't a regulation. It's basically just a guide for community development. Any zoning ordinance has to be consistent with it. So when you're making zoning decisions or rezoning decisions, it's something you can rely on, but it's not itself something that's enforceable, I guess, if that makes sense. It's your ordinances that actually implement the plan. The plan is just sort of your overarching guide that is supposed to help you make decisions in the future.
Yeah, my only concern would be, obviously, we want to address affordability of housing, and the trade-off there is protecting the investment that current homeowners have. So, I totally get it, and that's why I want to make sure that the decisions that move forward, we're able to take them one at a time, and there isn't any commitment as far as units and values.
So, and this is kind of my line of work, so Aaron and I are in a lot of meetings together. So I think it's wonderful that Cottage Grove is really taking a step in this, because all of the municipalities throughout Dane County have been asked to do this, and the fact that Cottage Grove is really taking the lead in getting this done. So this, once this is completed, then WIDA funds will be available to us, so I think that's crucial. I am interested in knowing how long would you think that this process would take? Because I know typically it could take 6 to 12 months. what do you foresee for for Cottage Grove?
Yeah, I think they were estimating around 6 months or so. But it's kind of up to us to how fast we want to move, how much and what kind of public participation we want to do and that kind of thing. And it might also matter how many communities they get lined up, but as far as I know, I think we would be the first, so.
Great job. Thanks, Erin.
I'll make a motion that we approve the Village of Cottage Grove participation in the Dane County Technical Assistance Program for the Comprehensive Plan Housing Chapter Updates.
I'll second.
We have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next, then, we move to reports from village officers. Rick, anything from you?
Nothing to report.
All right. Cameron, you got a few things on here. You want to run us through them?
Yep. Just because we're just in budget season, just another reminder. Library is presenting their preliminary budget on Wednesday. The facilities is at 5, and then then the library board is at 6. EMS is presenting their budget option they'll be at the Cottage Grove station for their meeting on 9/19 at 6:30. Then the next set of meetings is going to be LEC or police on 9/24 and Parks and Rec on 9/26. Kind of what that means, by the end of September, we'll have all the recommended budgets to myself, and then Matt and I will work together on kind of finalizing a budget that's ultimately presented to the Budget Review Committee on October 14th. So please mark your calendar if you're on budget review. I'll send a reminder out there. And then there is a special board meeting, so that would be everybody here on October 28th, which is the village board workshop, followed by the final budget meeting, which would be November 18th. So there has to be a minimum of 15 days. So that's a regular meeting. There has to be a minimum of 15 days posted in the paper prior to acting on that budget. So what that does is that allows the community one last kind of review. We get any of that feedback. Again, people are welcome to come to the public hearing, but then ultimately passing the final budget on November 18th. So again, key dates, Budget Review Committee, October 14th, Village Board, October 28th, and then November 18th, again, is the final public hearing. For the second item, so really, this relates to kind of a conversation that was started in December of 2022. So TID 6 did a couple projects that had to get done regardless. And so at the time, the village had charged those projects to TID 6 district. That district did not create enough increment to pay for those projects. And so typically going forward, and it wasn't a direct result of what happened in TID 6, but we don't recommend improvements in for TIDs to pay for it unless we know that the cash flow is there to pay for the project. And that's similar why in TID districts, we do a lot of our agreements as pay-go agreements where they have to create the increment before, and we get the check before we provide any incentive. So this district still has a couple of years of this mechanism where we actually levy for these funds for the shortfall. But ultimately, just from the accounting perspective, it creates the advance, and every couple of years we have to forgive it. So this is a planned forgiveness, both the budget amendment and then the memo on the forgiveness is just the plan. This is the result of kind of the plan that was set in place.
You know, I guess one question I had was, I thought TID 9 was replacing TID 6, but in the backup, it talks like TID 6 goes beyond the original plan closure of 2025. Is that true?
Yeah, so on October 3rd, during the joint review meeting, there's going to be a recommended extension of TID 6. So TID 9 is overlapped. So the reason why we're extending it is there's going to be 2 years where the debt service payment falls off, but we can stay open to reduce the amount that's being forgiven. So that 6-year extension will allow us to kind of recoup some of the funds that will be kind of scheduled from the shortfall of the debt service payments. So that will be taken to joint review board on October 3rd.
Okay, so it hasn't been extended yet. The other question I had is TID 9, from what happened with Authentics, is generating a lot of cash. There is no way to cover.
So based off of how the district was created at the time, TID 6 unfortunately did not qualify to be a donee TIF or designated as, I forget what the term is. There's a distressed TID. Yeah, it didn't meet the state definition of a distressed TIF or a severely distressed TIF, and that is the only way another TIF district can pay another district's obligations. And ultimately that has to get approved at the joint review board meeting as well. It is, I guess, for new board members, I kind of forget that we have a lot of new faces here. It is important to note that the water utility did forgive the entire balance that was outstanding. At one point in time, there was 3 outstanding kind of big balances that were out there. So they, at that time, had forgiven the entire balance.
And just to add to Cameron's point too, this was a project that the village was pursuing regardless. The board at that time was more bullish on development happening quicker than it did, and but regardless, they were going to move forward with that project. They were just hoping there would be development revenue to pay for it, and that just didn't come in the form of TID 6. But TID 9 is doing well, but unfortunately can't transfer those funds. But ultimately, it's really the levy picking up the shortfall. But that would have been the case regardless, other than some hopes that the board had at that time, before any of us were around, by the way.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to, I mean, it was the right decision at the time, maybe not necessarily to code it all as a, so about half of the project was recovered through increment. So that's still better than putting the entire project cost as a levied project.
So is it 2 motions that you need from us? One on the budget amendment and one on the forgiveness?
You can go ahead and just do a motion on the budget amendment 2024-005 because that captures the direction from the memo.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the budget amendment 2024-005 as presented.
Second?
All right, we have a motion second then. Any other discussion?
Yeah, so I guess I got a question. So the 180,000 is coming out of the debt service fund,
Correct.
okay? And how does that impact that particular fund and what we would expect there?
So because it was as planned, there's money set aside specific for that purpose. Kind of part of why we could have waited to the end of the TID district to do this, but part of waiting 6 years to do it, we would have been forgiving $1 million. And that constant reminder to the board, this is what we're doing, kind of enhances the transparency side of it. And I would, again, in 2 years from now, bring the recommended forgiveness. That will likely be the last request for forgiveness, because then the last 2 years of the district are anticipated to recapture some cost.
So how much is, after this 180 forgiveness, how much is remaining?
Let me grab that for you.
So by the time we close it in 2031, there's one additional possible debt forgiveness, right?
Yeah, one maybe a 3-year, another 3-year period of time, because the debt service payment is approximately $118,000 a year, and there's about $60,000 of revenue up until the last 2 years, which is 2030 and 2031. So then we're looking at, so like if we're looking at 2026 or 2025, we're looking at a shortfall of about $56,000. 26, a shortfall of 54,000, 27, a 56,000 shortfall, and then a 59,000 shortfall, and then 56. And then there's 2 years where we'll recapture basically 60,000 a year to, instead of forgiving the advance, they're just gonna go ahead and pay back that portion of the advance, and whatever the residual effect is will be the final forgiveness.
So when you hear Greg Johnson from Ellers or Harry, our other financial advisor, speak to TID eligible versus TID feasible, this is what we're talking about. So when the Joint Review Board approves a project plan that it shows the village's planned use of TID funds with public improvements, possible incentives, and things like that, which gives the village the option to spend funds in that way. But that doesn't mean that it's always financially feasible. So it makes it eligible, but in this case, the board at that time dedicating revenue that isn't there, it wasn't financially feasible. You are backed by the levy, and it's a needed project, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just made our lives a little bit difficult from a development prospect, and that's ultimately why we had to do an overlay for TID 9, because what happened is then you couldn't attract development to TID 6 because we were starting in the red, and someone would come in and want an incentive, and it was like, well, we need to pay ourselves back for this capital improvement, and it just made it really difficult.
So if I added the numbers, there's probably another $150,000 bogey out there for debt forgiveness between now and 2031. Approximately. So there's another big chunk of forgiveness coming. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and again, this is, and for those who are listening, this is a transparency step. Like I said, I could bring this at the very end, but I just do think it's good to bring it back at least every other year because it is something that's factored into the annual budget through kind of our debt service levy. And I highly, highly, highly encourage anybody listening to please attend the Joint Review Board meeting, at least virtually. They do a really good job. Greg does a fantastic job of going through every single TIF district and really explaining where things are in the process. Highly encourage it.
All right, any other discussion? All right, having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks, Cameron. All right, then we'll move to communication business, and first up is the consideration of the vouchers. I had a question. What are the you already answered the question about Brown Equipment Company, so that's the vac truck. What's WPRA summer tickets? We at the end of the vouchers. What is that?
Yep, so what we do is we collect, the Parks and Rec program sells tickets at a discount. So this just represents the cost of those tickets. The revenue that we brought in for the tickets is roughly $8,800. So essentially they earned $400 by running this program or selling these tickets. So that's just paying for the tickets that we acquired. There's no risk to the village. So when we get these tickets, we only pay for what we utilize and we return any ones we don't use. So it's a great little program to earn a little bit of additional funds.
And do you know what the tickets are for? At it's Wisconsin Parks and Rec Association.
Okay.
Is what the acronym is, but.
That did not come up in the Google search, by the way.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone knows the specific tickets.
Are they the discounted tickets for like Noah's Ark and you see the advertisements on the Facebook page?
They're very popular. We get a lot of calls about them.
Okay.
So we didn't run out this year, but it's likely that we'll request more tickets next year because we did sell out.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question on, there was a line item, it's a big item, and I'm sure it's all part of, I'm just curious, it's Town of Cottage Grove for the Squad 1 replacement for $455,000.
Yep, so that was from the budget. It's replacement of Squad 1. So the difference between, there's a little bit that's in 411. That's the amount that was originally budgeted. At the time, there was a difference between what the village thought a percentage, the equalized value, and ultimately what was settled on utilizing. So the other amount is coming out of the 2% fire dues, so it's an eligible expense. So we're able to not dive into any more borrowed funds. So that's kind of where that leftover is. So that is the only large purchase coming up besides the ladder truck in 2028.
But they're the fiscal agent, so that's why we're paying them.
Yeah, good question. And it is my understanding that they're picking that up tomorrow, which is why it's on the bills listing tonight.
I'll make a motion that we approve the vouchers as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion second then. Any other discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Correspondence, I think the board got plenty of input from various folks regarding the topic that we're going to be discussing more of tonight, which is the library related to learning ladder property. But everybody got those. So I don't have anything else. Does anybody? Okay. Upcoming community events, put a plug already for October 12th. Anything from anybody else? All right, there's just soccer games and other games from all the kids back to school and all that good stuff for everybody's running around doing. All right, then we'll move to future agenda items other than the budget. Anything else you want to hit on?
Yes, one, Miller Communications will be having, we should have a proposal from them within the next couple of weeks on possible referendum-related communications, should the board continue to want to move forward with the Learning Ladder library project. So they'll have some options of what that would look like, and we can have that on the next agenda.
And again, a reminder, this is the organization that specializes in referendums. All right, if there is nothing else on agenda items, then I will make the motion that the village board goes into closed session to establish negotiating position relative to possible acquisition of a library space. The Village of Cottage Grove Board will enter in a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating, negotiating, and purchasing public properties, the investing of public funds, the conducting of other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a second, then the roll call.
Williams.
Aye.
Valencia.
Aye.
Stoa.
Yes.
Murphy. Cal Nelson. Gage. And Dahl.
Aye.
We are in closed session.